doing this week? John, how are you?
Doing great.
Great. How about you?
I'm okay. Unfortunately, I'm watching too much of the news, as I'm sure a lot of you out there are as well. We've got to talk about the inflation measures, what we can do for retirees, pre-retirees right now, hopefully some solutions for folks as well. I'm going to leave that part to both of you guys right now, but along with severe drops in the market, the incredibly high inflation, interest rates rising, slowing in the housing markets and so forth, this, I truly believe, is when you need financial guidance the most right now, right? Hey, John, you and I have joked before, the last 14 years, it was pretty easy for anybody to do well on the markets, right?
Throw a dart at the dartboard, and pretty much anything, any asset class that you're going to pick is pretty much going to have appreciated over that time period.
Now I kind of feel throw any dart in a board, and that asset class is going down right now.
It's going down. Whether you're stocks, bonds, the places where we went for safety all of these years have really, unfortunately, it impacts the retirees that are trying to make their portfolios safer, and you've seen fixed income drop just about the same as equities.
Chris, specifically, let's talk about clients who you have right now, the folks who you help manage. Most of them either getting ready for retirement, pretty close to it, or already in retirement. Are they calling you concerned about inflation, needing to adjust the budget, saying we need a little bit more money right now, or have these kinds of factors been taken into account before?
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely from the clients that I work with, I get calls every now and then, but most of the time when you work with a professional, that's part of the planning process, is that we plan for inflation and those what-if scenarios that we plan for with clients. Because when you're sitting down and, I think of the engineer out there who does the math himself and says, you know what, I got X, Y, Z in my portfolio. I can live on X amount of dollars. I take a little for taxes. How often are they including inflation? And then if they do, I'll bet they're undershooting that number.
That's exactly the point that I wanted to make. Yeah, you could even have the engineer out there who's plotting everything out, had everything in their graphed out paper at home, using their pencil and their protractor.
Spreadsheets.
But who would have thought about putting 9% inflation into their calculations? So you're not worried about shortcomings with your clients?
No, if you work with a planner and you work with any of us at Open Air, I mean, part of that process of planning and leading up to retirement is planning for these what-ifs, right? So we want to make sure that we work on what's the money that's going out, what's the expenses, and are you realistic with what you can spend? I think that's a great place to start for anybody. And then, what if we have these one-off scenarios where we get inflation? It hasn't been this high since the 80s. We got to plan for those one-off scenarios, and we have buckets of money in different risk asset classes like safe money, risky money, and so we can lean on some of the safer stuff in market turmoil times like we're going through right now as well. So it's kind of a bag of all of it hitting at once. Markets in volatility, inflation high is a 40-year high, all this stuff going on at once. But a lot of my clients that I work with and I get phone calls from, it's more of just a reassurance call, like, hey, this is what we talked about, this is what we planned for. So this is the time where we've got to just stay calm, know that we put this into plan, we've been working on this, and that you've got professionals like us working on it daily.
John, how about yourself? CNBC said that 71% of retirement age investors are worried that inflation is going to negatively impact their nest egg.
71%?
Yeah.
Come sit with me. It's 100%. 100% across the board are concerned about inflation, and I don't know anyone who's not. But going back to what Chris said, you're having those multiple buckets of money. We spend a lot of time talking through what our plan is going to be and reinforcing what that plan is. And there are adjustments that are made along the way. But when you have multiple sources of places where you can go to drive that income, maybe the plan has been driving it from those risky assets. Last 14 years, that's where we've taken our income from, because that has been able to produce for us. And our clients have that money, but they also have the safe money and those buckets of money that they can go in and access while the market's down.
What about, okay, speaking of the market down, what about folks who are doing this on their own, some of the engineers, as we like to call them, or do-it-yourselfers? What about overreacting to the market? What about people who are jumping out of the market right now after already taking a 20% loss?
Oof, man, that's tough.
It's really tough, and right now, part of the show and getting an analysis, because what you don't want to do is, and what we saw a lot in 2008, and there's a lot of advisors out there that maybe didn't live through 2008. I worked for one of the big box banks during 2008, and you saw a lot of folks move to cash. and they move to cash for the most part at the very bottom. When we make decisions, you know, when are you most scared? It's whenever it hurts the worst. So whenever you make that decision is usually at the bottom. When are you going to get back in? How are you going to make that decision?
Yeah, you've got to time it right twice, going out, coming back in.
What factor are you going to use to say, all right, now it's time for me to get back invested again? And what you see day in and day out is those folks, years pass and it never feels right again. It never feels right again. It never feels right again.
I think, unfortunately, the psychology for all of us is that when things are bad, they're never going to be good again. And when things are good, they're never going to be bad. And so, you know, especially like you talked about in the last 14 years with things going up nonstop, I think people got complacent. And I met with a lot of people over the years that had too much risk in their portfolio. And we would go to have these tough conversations. You know, what are you going to do when this thing goes, you know, 25, 30, 40% down because you're not protected, you're not diversified. So we got to work on that. And so, you know, a lot of clients that I work with and have worked with over the years, that's part of that conversation. And it's every quarter, every year, we've got to remind you, this is why we do it. This is why we structure it this way.
Yeah, folks, I remember doing programs with you as soon as the end of last year, and it was people fighting to look for returns, that there was no interest, even the safe money wasn't working on anything. And we have 14 years of kind of being asleep at the wheel because there really wasn't much angst or pain that people were feeling. And it's all come crashing down in like 6 months.
Yeah, and you know, we did have, you know, COVID, we did have 2020, and a lot of things really did have a major correction during that time period. But if you skipped a quarterly statement, it all came back so quickly. And I'm here to tell you, I think this time is different. You know, when it happened through COVID, we had a lot of government stimulus to come prop the market back up. And it is exactly opposite this time, Spike. It is exactly opposite this time. And I'm not sure, you know, I think a lot of people need to look at this and understand that this is probably a bigger issue than just a 6-month down and up. This is going to take longer to recover from than it has in the past.
And part of what you were saying, that stimulus money that was going out, it was propping up the markets. And in fact, a lot of people were playing with it. You know,
40% of the money supply was created in the last 2 years. 40% of our money supply was created in the last 2 years. So when you look at
it's the
that,
exact opposite right now. So
they're pulling money
rising
off the
interest
table.
rate, they're pulling money out.
right.
They're making it harder to borrow and making it much harder to spend with the high inflation right now. So we need solutions.